100 Winters, Retracing the Great Race Against Death. Written by Jonathan Nathaniel Hayes. Illustrated by Caleb Gingras. Chapter 19, Golovan. Waking up in Elam Saturday morning, there was no school or church presentations, so we took our time preparing for the day. I tended the dogs, Jamie scouted the route out of town, Jeff made breakfast, and Caleb interviewed a local resident, a village historian. Before I knew it, I was pulling the quick stick and launching down the slick plowed street headed for the bay. This leg offered a wide variety of terrains in a relatively short stretch. A peninsula juts out between Elam and Golovan, and on that peninsula sits the Quicktillick Mountains range, our next challenge. As was so much of this journey, the trail used by villagers and Iditarod mushers between Elam and Golovan hadn't been packed yet, so Jamie and I decided the best route was for me to drop down onto the sea ice and skirt the northern shore of Norton Bay, westward for 8 miles until I reach Walla Walla Shelter cabin on shore. From there, I would begin our 8-mile ascent over the mountains, culminating at the summit of what is called Little Mount McKinley. Taking the seacoast route led us past sites familiar to locals, but seldom seen by Iditarod mushers. Massive vertical stone columns, remnants of broken cliffside, rose from the ice like frozen sentinel giants. I stopped to take photos of the team in the shadow of one of these towering formations. The scene felt mythic. Wind howled through the gaps between the stone pillars, creating an eerie whistling like the earth itself was breathing. But the dogs seemed unfazed by the 3-story ice-slick towers that dwarfed them in their shadow. We climbed from the sea ice to a small shelter cabin at the base of the Quicktillick Mountains, the Walla Walla cabin. I chatted with Jamie and Jeff at the cabin while we waited for Caleb to catch up. He stayed behind in Koyuk to interview a local with family ties to the original serum run. Once he arrived, the rest of the crew took off for Golovan, and the dogs and I began the ascent. Little Mount McKinley. The name is deceiving. Mount McKinley, or Denali, as the natives call it, is the tallest mountain in North America. Anything compared to it is little, and this surely wasn't some little hill. It rises more than 5,000 feet in 8 miles, with several switchbacks and false summits. A century ago, Leonard Seppala and his team took 4 hours to summit these 8 miles. It was humbling to imagine Seppala here hauling the serum over the same stretch in a blizzard so fierce that wind flattened his sled on its side. Our trail conditions were better than what he faced, but our speed was only slightly faster. We averaged 3 miles per hour. To maintain that pace, I had to be off the sled the entire climb, hiking or jogging alongside the team, sinking 3 inches to a foot with every step. Each time I turned a corner, only to find another false summit. I'd stop and look back at how far we'd come. The encouragement of hindsight helped counter the discouragement of what lay ahead. Like little David, who believed he could slay a giant because he had already slain a lion and a bear, our confidence had built over this expedition, one hurdle at a time. Childhood songs often play in my head during long runs. I have an almost photographic memory for lyrics and scripture passages. I can even remember horrible commercial jingles from the 1980s. Climbing this mountain, there was an old church song that played over in my mind. The road to Zion. Sometimes it's good to look back down. We've come so far. We've gained such ground. But joy is not in where we've been. Joy is who's waiting at the end. There is a road inside of you. Inside of me there is one too. No stumbling pilgrim in the dark. The road to Zion's in your heart. My mind often dredges up lyrics to fit the moment, and so I often sing to my dogs. I didn't realize we were being watched. Caleb had stopped his machine at the peak and launched his drone, capturing footage of our ascent. Later that night, he told me, "Watching you climb that mountain with your dogs, I have an even deeper respect for mushers and what they do now." As kind and encouraging as these words were, I would have gladly traded them during that 3-hour crossing for a lighter sled, a harder trail, or a fresher team. After a long, steep descent, we dropped onto the sea ice of Golovan Bay. We were 5 miles from town. It had been a short run, and I was leaning heavily toward pushing through to White Mountain tonight, so I could keep my Sunday morning invitation to speak at the village church and give the dogs a true Sabbath rest. Sensing the approach of the village, the dogs shot across the bay as if our journey had just begun. I could see my teammates and their machines waiting on the far shore. When I pulled up, the team lurched in their harnesses, not wanting to stop. "It's a ghost town," Jeff said. "We had to drive around for 15 minutes before we found anyone. Basketball tournament. The entire village of Golovan is in White Mountain right now for a game." "The village store?" I asked, hoping for some trail magic, a cooked sandwich, or maybe a soda. "All closed up," Jeff said with a chuckle. "Believe me, I checked." "Well, that settles it then. On to White Mountain. It's only another 20 miles or so. We'll skip the long rest and give it all to the dogs there with a day off." I'm often asked why our expedition logged more miles than the original Serum run a century ago. The reason boils down to this: climate change. When Seppala crossed Norton Sound a century ago, he was able to make a more northwesterly direction than we can today. He had sea ice there that no longer exists, so his route cut out Koyuk. Today, Charlie Olson's coastal route is also gone. The loss of sea ice forced us inland to White Mountain, adding another day to our expedition. The original route continued along the coast. I didn't want to believe it, so I kept asking all along the coast in every village, and I received the same answer. You can't cross the bay. You have to go up to White Mountain. Golovan is where Seppala turned the Serum over to the next musher in the relay, Charlie Olson, and his team of 7 Malamutes, led by his lead dog Jack. Seppala, Togo, and the rest of his Siberians thus ended their contribution to saving the children of Nome here, with more than 260 miles logged. His carrying of the Serum may have been less than 100 miles, but his journey out to retrieve it and then back to the village was 261. Seppala himself rightly counted his contribution as over 300 miles. Think of it. After Seppala handed off the Serum, he then, without fanfare, turned his exhausted team toward Nome. No medals, no crowds for Sigrid. Jeff led me through the village and around the loose dogs, and we dropped onto the lagoon behind the sand spit. The snow machines took off across the 10-mile lagoon to finish the remaining 20 miles or so to White Mountain. Once they were out of sight and we were a couple miles from the village, I realized I had made another huge mistake. The dogs had been running hard, expecting Golovan to be the finish line for the day. Now I was asking them to pull out of town with only a trail snack and no real rest. To the dogs, we had an agreement. They pull into village, I reward them with rest and a meal. As the machines disappeared into the distance, the dogs realized I wasn't keeping my end of the bargain. Many slowed or stopped, shooting me an unmistakable glare of resentment. Despite the even, hard-packed trail across the lagoon, they crawled forward. The mutiny of the many meant my most honest dogs were once again pulling more than their fair share. I should have stopped right then and there, but I kept thinking that they'll snap out of it. I was wrong. I had broken our deal, our run-rest cycle. Then the consequences of my wishful thinking came to a head. Mutiny. Jester sat down. Jester, my biggest, hardest working, most honest dog. He sat down, then turned and looked away as though he was ashamed. Of course, when your largest dog stops, the whole team stops. So I faked it, as though the stop was my idea. Whoa! I walked up to Jester and stroked his back. You okay, boy? His eyes darted around and wouldn't meet mine. He was embarrassed, but he was spent. Other dogs had left him with the lion's share of the load, and he just couldn't make up their slack anymore. No, Jester, this is my fault, I said. Then I spoke the words I knew he would understand. You're such a good boy. Good boy. I'm so proud of you. His tail started to sway. He raised his eyes to meet mine, and I scratched his signature floppy ears. I scurried back to my sled and dug out the reserved beaver meat, handing it out to the team. Good dog, I kept repeating, trying to disguise my worry, trying to rebuild the trust that I had broken. Darkness settled around us. Snow machines appeared downriver, the villagers of Golovan returning from the tournament. Scores of them. I smiled and waved at each one as they passed to let them know that I was fine. One sled looped around and pulled up beside me. It was Caleb. Everything okay? You're right where I left you. I failed my dogs, I said, not really caring if it made any sense. I didn't keep the bargain. My team had shut down. I'd read about this happening to Iditarod mushers once they reached the coast. When this happened in a race, most have to pull out. Was this permanent? Was this the end of the expedition? That's when it clicked. The reason my hardest workers, Kuna and now Jester, were shutting down wasn't weakness of body or mind. It was because they weren't regulating themselves like the others. They were giving me 100% every time, no holding back. If my honest dogs tell me that we need to rest, we need to rest. And the musher should have been smart enough to give it to them before they had to demand it. While Caleb isn't a mind reader, he'd grown used to my precision-timed alarms for rests and runs. How much longer are you going to rest them here? He asked. Until Jester tells me it's okay to go again. Could be another hour, or I could be sitting here all night. Jester will let me know. Thanks for listening to this free audio recording of my new book, 100 Winters. I want to invite you to click like, to subscribe, to make sure you don't miss a chapter, and to share this audiobook with your friends. If you're enjoying it, then I want to ask you to return the favor by hopping onto Amazon and ordering yourself a copy. You can also go to Mushmane's website or social media accounts and request an autographed copy if you wish. Until the next chapter, Godspeed and happy trails.